everyone. Welcome to this webinar on Zoho People. It's so good to meet you all virtually today. Hope you're all keeping safe. Thank you once again for joining us today. I'm Annie. I work for the Zoho People team, and I will be your host for today's session. In today's webinar, as we all know, we will be discussing a very pragmatic, much needed topic, I would say, what HR need to be thinking as businesses begin to return to their workplaces. So as HR professionals, as managers, as administrators, we've been seeing a lot of new things, a lot of changes in the past couple of months, like the lockdown phase, the work from phase, and so on. Now, this is the time, the time is here for businesses to reopen. And again, as HR professionals, we all have a lot of questions, even hesitations on how to go about this, how to implement things, and so on. And we thought we can help you with expert advice right now. So with me today, I have our guest influencer / speaker of the day, Nick Holley. So Nick, I'm really happy to have you amidst us today. Thank you so much for joining us. So before I hand it over to him, let me quickly introduce Nick Holley to all of you. Back in April, we had a session with Nick on what HR should be doing during this pandemic. And now we are hosting a session on returning to work. So most of you here, you know about Nick, but for those who don't know, Nick works as the Director of Learning at the Corporate Research Forum. So it's actually a platform that creates HR development programs and beautiful researchers, all with the aim to enhance the effectiveness of human resources. Nick has immense experience, 30 plus years working with organizations worldwide. Noteworthy mentions would include Rolls-Royce, Shell, Alliance, among others. And he was voted as the 5th most influential thinker in human resources by the HR magazine. So Nick Holley undoubtedly is the right person to share his thoughts with us, his exclusive views, and also give expert answers to our doubts and questions. So before he takes over, I have a quick announcement. Please note that you are in the listen-only mode. This will be a partially interactive session. So Nick will discuss, share his thoughts, and stop between every 10 to 15 minutes to answer your questions. So please use the questions space on your control panel to send us over your questions. Because of time constraints, we'll be answering 3 to 5 questions at every pause. And also I request you all to kindly stick to the topic, the context that Nick is discussing today. So without much ado, let me give it over to Nick.
Great, thanks very much indeed. So first of all, can you hear me okay? So hopefully you can hear me and hopefully you can see my screen now. So welcome everybody, welcome back to those who listened to me earlier on in the year. And the title is deliberately provocative, return to work. And I'm reading all over the place on the internet about the return to work. Well, I don't know about you, but for the last 4 or 5 months, I've been working. For a lot of organizations, though, the thing is not the return to work, it's the return to the office. And I read a McKinsey article only this morning that estimated by the end of December, 88% of people will be back in the office. Equally, you look at Amazon and Microsoft, they're not returning to the office until January next year. Google are not returning to the office until July 2021. And I think the first thing I would say as a memorable quote is, at the moment, office should be a destination, not a purpose. Why send people back to the office to sit in front of a desk, to sit in front of a screen and do what they've been doing for the last few months very successfully from home? And the interesting thing is, if you look at studies, we've actually seen on average people are working 1 hour a day longer, because the vast majority of people are committed to their organizations. and then not having to do the commuting. You know, my wife is literally in an office below me in our house, and she starts work at 8:30, whereas normally she'd have an hour, hour and a half drive to the office and back. So she's actually being more productive working at home. So what I'm going to do is talk about 6 particular aspects, and I'm going to start off talking about health and safety. I'll talk about a couple of aspects, and then we'll open up for questions. The first thing is, before going back to the office, you have a moral requirement. Now, I don't know in your country, but in the UK, you also have a legal requirement. But we have a duty of care to our people not to put them at risk. And this isn't just about full-time employees, it's about contractors, agency people, visitors, etc. We have a duty of care, and we have to identify any hazard, anything that could cause harm or injury. And it's not just assessing it, it's about writing it down, recording it. And in my opinion, you must publish this, first of all, so you can reassure your people and you can measure what you're doing about it. The second thing with health and safety is you should put in place contact tracing. Now, recently, not recently, a couple of months ago, we opened up restaurants, etc. in the UK. I was in one on Saturday with some friends, and they came over and they took our details and they took our phone number. So if anybody did go down with COVID, they could contact them. So you need to put in place proper monitoring of all staff and visitors. Take down their contact details, so if there is an outbreak, you can follow up as required. The fourth thing with health and safety is cleaning. And you've got to put in place much deeper cleaning for the whole of the workplace. You've got to clean regularly and establish what are the standards of cleaning for COVID-19. Again, a couple of weeks ago, gyms reopened. When I go in, I have my temperature taken. I can't just go in, I have to book in advance. There's sanitizers everywhere, but they have a cleaning team that deep cleans every night when the gym is shut. And then throughout the day, they're going throughout the gym, cleaning regularly. So you need to put these protocols in place. And what you did before COVID is not going to be good enough afterwards. The next element is the standards and the protocols. So PPE, personal protective equipment. What are you going to do about masks? Again, it kind of intrigued me. I went to Denmark, my wife's Danish, at the beginning of August. And in the UK, everybody in every shop must wear a mask. And I went into a shop in Denmark and people looked at me very strangely because I was the only person who had a mask on. Now, I remember years ago, my wife got quite angry when we went to Japan, to Japan and China, to the Far East, about people wearing masks. And I pointed out to her, people wear a mask out of a sense of social duty. It's not just protecting themselves. These are people who have a cold or a flu and are wearing masks to stop them transmitting to each other. And we've got to remember that some people are asymptomatic. So some people will have the virus but won't show any of the symptoms. And again, I think as a duty of care, you should enforce the wearing of masks in the workplace. Hand washing and sanitizers. I think we need to establish standards at a bare minimum when you come into the office, when you go into meetings, when you leave meetings, when you leave the office. I think you should be insisting that people sanitize, and you should be having sanitizers around the office. And you should, that's why I'm showing this picture, you should be signposting where these are and signposting when people come into the office, when you email them before you're planning the reopening of the office. You need to be publishing standards that you will enforce, and also physical contact. And I'm going to come on in the next session and talk about the physical space. Now, a couple of days ago, I was talking to the head of L&D of one of the big Swiss banks. I won't mention which one, but you can guess which one of, well, it's certainly down to 2. And at the moment, they only have 4% of people back in the office. Certainly in the CRF, the business, one of the businesses I work closely with, we leave it up to the individual. The offices are open. But I think we are going to have to seriously rethink in big offices our office space and our office portfolio. BP are talking about potentially halving their property portfolio, particularly offices. Halliburton, the biggest oil services company in the world, they are shutting 100 facilities. And in New York, the estimate is that vacancy rates of office buildings are going to rise by 10 to 12%. So we need to plan very carefully, not just the human aspects, the financial aspects of, are we going to keep all our offices open? Do we really need the size of offices that we've had in the past? Then when we get back to the office, we need to think about desks. How are we going to distance? So again, in my local gym, they have the same number of machines, but half of them have a sign on saying this is not going to be kept open, so people can maintain a 1 meter distance. And I think it should be a minimum of 1 meter distancing between desks. I think you need to look at staggered entry times. You know, in the past, people work 9 to 5. Is that really the right way to have everybody coming into the office at the same time? I think you should stagger it. I, for instance, tend to start work at 6:30 in the morning, and always have, because I'm a morning person. I'm not really very good after lunch or in the evening. Some people like morning. Some people equally like working later. So I think we should provide flexibility. And also, I think what's important is to avoid the rush hour. You know, why put people at risk by enforcing everybody traveling when the tube, the underground trains are full? Also, you need to have a policy of what do you do if colleagues won't socially distance? You know, this should be enforced. It should not be left up to the individual. And also signposting in the office in terms of one-way systems between desks and thinking about ventilation. Queuing and lift management. Again, CRF in our building, you are only allowed 1 person in the lift. Now, the trouble is we're on the 6th floor, so it's unlikely that people can walk all that way. But we do have to think about the protocols around lifts and around queuing. We need to think about reception areas. Again, one of the things to think about here is temperature checks. As I say, when I get into my gym, the first thing you get is a non-physical temperature check that tells me if I have a normal temperature. But again, if you own your reception, that's fine. But if you're in a shared office, what are you going to insist on in terms of protocols in reception? I've already mentioned contact tracing, queuing, etc. And then the final part of this is around food and drink. You know, with water stations, tea and coffee, where people often leave biscuits and chocolates. What are you going to do? What are you going to do about canteens? I would argue that the days of having a hot buffet are gone for the moment. Food should be individually wrapped. And again, seating. There's a lovely cafe I go into locally, and they've done a couple of things. They've put perspex screens between every table and set of chairs, and they're opposite each other. So what they've done is staggered. So this one's open, this one's open, and this one's open. So people aren't sitting opposite each other. And again, you know, thinking about longer opening hours and staggered traffic flow. So again, people aren't all queuing at the same time. And how are you going to plan the traffic flow around the canteen? So let me stop there for the first break. And are there any questions? Bearing in mind, I'm not a lawyer, and above all, in whatever jurisdiction you are in, at a minimum, you should be keeping to the law. But I am arguing that we have a duty of care that goes beyond simply keeping to the letter of the law. We need to think of the spirit of the law. So, any questions from anybody? So again, I love making this as interactive as possible. It's really boring for you if I talk at you for a long period of time. So please, if you have any questions, please come on to chat, and Zoho, the organisers, will pull those together. So I think now I want to turn into a more interesting part. All I've talked about so far is kind of the physical layout, etc. And I want to pick up on some of the themes I talked about back in April, because we need to listen to our employees. You know, a lot of them are going to be really worried at the moment, and I do not think this is the moment to impose ways of working on them. I said this back in April, and I'll repeat it again. How you treat your employees today through the lockdown, but through this return to the office, is going to have a huge impact on them. And I think one of the dangers is that you assume that everybody's going to be desperate for a job, because unemployment will go up. I think that is just not a good way of thinking. I think people who are underperformers will be desperate for a job, but your high performers will still have a choice. So let's think about a number of things. First of all, in listening to your people, don't assume everyone wants to return to work. I saw a recent survey where 85.6% actually don't want to go back to work. You've got to listen to them. You know, some people will want to go back to work. Some people are extroverts. They love people. And the thing they've hated during lockdown is the physical interaction with people, just having the chats around the water cooler. So one of the questions is, what do you do if you ask them to go back to work and they don't want to go back to work? Now, you can withhold their pay, but you've got to be very, very careful if you're going to discipline them or sack them. You know, again, under UK employment law, people can protect themselves from serious and imminent danger. So the danger is that they think you are putting them at risk by sending them back to the office where they might contract COVID-19. So you don't assume everyone wants to return to work, and you've got to think very carefully about what you're going to do if they refuse to work. But above all, you've got to listen to their concerns. COVID has had an asymmetrical impact on people. If I'm perfectly honest, these last few months haven't been a problem for me. I'm a little bit of an introvert, so not meeting people isn't a problem. And I've been running things like this online, meeting lots of people I haven't met before. Also, I've got a nice house. I've got a big garden. I've got no young children who need to be homeschooled. And I haven't got any aging relatives. To be honest, I am the aging relative these days. So for me, it hasn't been a problem. It's very easy and very dangerous to assume it's been the same for everybody. You know, some of my colleagues with CRF, they live in single bedroom flats in not very nice parts of London, and it's been horrendous for them. You know, in the UK, 2.2 million people have been categorized as high risk. So that might be that they have underlying health problems, age, etc. So we have to listen to people's concerns, their fears, their worries about a journey to work, whether in an enclosed space, their care responsibilities, care for elderly relatives, care for children. Some of them have probably gone through a bereavement. You know, I haven't been touched personally, but one of my brother-in-law's best friends, literally within a space of 24 hours, went from being healthy to being dead from COVID-19. So we have to listen to them, but we do have to respond consistently, because the danger is we can unintentionally discriminate against people. You know, changing hours, for instance, could impact women who have childcare issues. The way you set things up in terms of access might unintentionally discriminate against disabled people. And we have to think about this. I think it's critical because of this and our duty of care, we should provide counselling and support services to people. And I'm going to talk about this in a little bit more detail. We have to ensure that our managers and our leaders hold one-to-ones with their people before they go back to the office and listen to them. This is not the time to send a blanket email to everybody, assuming everybody is the same. And one of the questions here was, how best can one deal with underperformance due to remote working? First of all, we should not punish the majority for the underperformance of the few. I think there's a danger that we assume that the majority of people are going to, what we call in England, playing hooky, that they're at home and they're not actually working. Certainly, all the research shows the vast majority of people are working harder than they've ever done before. In fact, I think one of the challenges is encouraging people to take breaks and to take holidays, because they're worried about their job, they're worried about the survival of their organization, and they want to demonstrate commitment. So I think that dealing with underperformance is really the same as it's always been. We've got to deal with underperformance through our managers, and we've got to coach our managers to never assume anything. You know, the word assumption, I think, is one of the most dangerous things. I always remember a friend of mine told me a horrendous story. He had a high performer in his team who, over a period of time, her performance started dropping off. She was turning up late, she was taking days off. When she was in the office, she didn't seem to be focusing very well. So he talked to HR and he took her through a disciplinary process, which started with a first written warning, and then had a meeting with her, and he started being quite aggressive, and she burst into tears. And he said, "So what's and she said, "Well, I'm sorry, I didn't want to burden you with this, but my daughter is suffering from leukemia, and it's really difficult for me to concentrate. I'm having to take her to hospital, and I'm really, really sorry. I didn't want to tell you this because it's unfair of me to burden." And he said he wanted a hole to open up in front of him and swallow him up. And he just said, "Let's stop the process. The most important thing now is, how do we help her?" So if we believe people are our most important assets, then we need to deal with underperformance on a one-to-one basis. We need to set up calls, we need to listen to what the issue is, and we need to deal with it. Equally, if there is not a good reason for underperformance, then we need to deal with it, because it's unfair on the people who are performing. But let's not penalize the majority for the shortcomings of the few. And I agree with Princey, and it's part of what I've said. We have to think about the commute and this concept of, first of all, being clear when being in the office really, really matters. You know, as I said at the beginning, getting people into the office to sit in front of a computer screen. Why? You know, it's about meetings, it's about interaction, it's about working with customers directly, holding customer meetings. It might be about innovation, although I'm involved in one of my customers at the moment where we're redesigning a part of HR using design thinking, but doing it virtually. So I think we've got to be very careful. And by the way, your trains and buses are crowded. So it's just the same in London. But I think it's this duty of care is the critical thing. And I think part of this is we need to think through how we re-engage and re-energize our people. How are we going to reboard them? You know, this is not just a case of saying, right, we're all back to work the same as normal. Again, how we reboard people will have a big impact beyond the crisis. People will remember. And again, I don't think it's enough to send a blanket email out to everybody that runs through all the legal requirements and all the, you know, all the protocols, etc. We've got to encourage managers to sit down in a Zoom call or go to or whatever the platform is and chat to people about this. You know, managers are there to manage, and too often they think of themselves as super doers. They think of them as technical experts. Well, my view is if they're a technical expert who is not good at managing people, why do you put them into management roles? You need dual career paths. And I think at the moment it's even more critical that managers are put into management roles because they're good at managing people and because they think through how to do it. This is not the time to have people who are bad managers managing people. I worked in one company in the Middle East, and I was an executive coach there, and I coached a lot of senior people. And I coached this one person, and I did a 360 with them, and it was horrendous. Everybody hated them. And when I chatted to him, he said, you know what, Nick, I don't like managing people. I'm an introvert. I'm a deep technical expert. And what's even worse is I'm not doing the stuff I'm expert at because I have to spend my time managing. But when you dug deeper, the only way he'd get promoted or get good pay or get the corner office was to become a manager. So what we worked on was creating a dual path where people who are good at doing what we need them to be great at today do it, and we don't ask people who aren't good at it to do it. We need to reinforce the values and the purpose of the organization. You know, if you look at Daniel Pink's work around motivation, people are motivated by autonomy, by giving the chance to do their job in the way they think is correct. They're motivated by mastery, by becoming masters at what they're good at, but they're also motivated by purpose. They're motivated by having a vision that this organization does more than just do work. This organization makes a difference to people. It's interesting, in a local hospital, with the people who do the MRI scans. So that's that big circular machine where the body goes in and you scan the brain, and it's, you know, it's produced incredible leaps forward in survival rates for cancer, etc. The trouble is these people are fundamentally technicians. They're not doctors or nurses or medical. They twiddle dials and push and put people on. When they put the photo of the patient on the file, they saw a 23% increase in the productivity of these technicians. The reason was they could make a link between twiddling the dials and real human beings and real outcomes. And I think this is a moment where, again, the danger is we do short-term things in terms of raising productivity, get people back to the office, etc., etc. Let's, as part of the reboarding, really reinforce the values of the business and the purpose of the organization. Because yes, we do need to connect with people's hands in terms of what they do. We do need to connect with people's heads in terms of their minds and how they think, because that's where the majority of work is done. But we need to connect with people's hearts, because if we connect with people's hearts, people will go above and beyond. And as I say, all the research shows that over the last few weeks and months, people have gone above and beyond because they put their heart and soul into their job. I think another part of that is we need to involve them. I talked about autonomy. You know, one of the things I would strongly argue is we shouldn't be doing this to people. We should be doing it with people. You know, this is the first lesson of change management. And this, by the way, is a massive change management task. And change management isn't just about delivering, you know, getting them back to the office in the right time, the right cost, etc. It's delivering the end benefits to our customers. And that's about engaging hearts. And you engage people by involving them and doing it to them, not with them. And we need to reinvest in their development. I actually wrote a piece that will be up on the CRF blog page in the next few days about careers and how we support HR careers during the pandemic. My argument is we need to invest even more in people today. There was an interesting study by McKinsey of a group of companies in the last recession, and they called them resilience. These companies outperformed the non-resilience by 40% in terms of total shareholder return. And what the resilience did was they cut hard and fast and early, but even while they were doing it, they were reinvesting in the future. And I think the challenge for most of us is our strategy will change, and therefore the strategic capability, the skills, the culture, the type of people we need is going to change. So we need to reinvest in their learning and development, not just to engage them, but to give them the skills for when we reset our businesses. The final thing is, I think we need to do a good job of recognizing what people have achieved during the last few months. This is unprecedented, what we've asked of our people. And by the way, I don't know in the audience how many of you are junior HR people and how many of you are HR directors. But boy, have I been proud of most HR people over the last few months. Wow, have we asked a lot of them. And the vast majority have delivered. So let's recognize them. And, you know, I remember years ago, somebody, you know, saying to me, you know, if you went into HR for recognition, you're in the wrong job. Because let's face it, it's the research scientists who develop the new products. It's the marketing people who attract more customers. It's the customer service people who serve our customers who get the recognition because they directly contribute to the bottom line. But HR has always indirectly contributed to the bottom line. And over the last few months, the demands we've placed on them, let's recognize them. But also let's recognize what people have done in their communities. You know, if we've been through Black Lives Matter, we're going through Me Too, you know, and I have seen amazing things in my local villages of people who've stepped up and supported their local communities. And I think that will make people proud. So let's advertise that in the business. Let's recognize that. So again, before I move on to the last 2 points, any questions on the first or the second sessions? And I'm almost begging you to ask questions because it makes it so much more relevant and interactive, because it's not just what I'm talking about in terms of my content. What matters is your context. So, you know, managing top management is critical. Great question, because don't forget, you in HR do not work for top management. This is a really critical mindset. You work for the long-term sustainability of the organization. And sometimes top management is the problem. So we need to have the courage to challenge top management, that not to say we don't want people to join back, but we need to listen. We need to have a more nuanced approach, and we need to challenge them. You know, that first statement I made at the very, very beginning, I think is the starting point for the challenge that we need to give to the business. You know, we need to make the statement, the office is a destination, not a purpose. And it's a destination with a purpose. And the purpose is not to sit in front of desks. So, you know, I think you need to challenge, because if the danger with their putting in resignations, if first of all that has a risk for capacity, will you have enough people to deliver to your customers? I think it's also a risk to capability, because in my opinion, the people who are probably leaving are the ones who can find other jobs. In my experience, the problem is that the people who are quitting, probably the ones you don't want to quit. You know, when you have a remote team all over the country, how do you keep the team spirit up? I think by encouraging and by doing a lot of communication, by doing what I've got on the screen here, by recognizing what people are doing. One of the things that we do as a business is every Friday we have a quiz. So it's during working hours, really important, but we have a quiz, and everybody each week is a quiz master. And there've been some amazing questions. You know, they've had this software that merges two people's faces together, and you have to identify who in the office, you know, is that person. I think the other thing is it comes back to involve people in it. Why don't you ask them? You know, we don't have to, you know, in my opinion, leaders and HR don't have to have all the answers. And this is a really important quote. It's not mine. It's a quote from a very good friend of mine called Mian Cheng Judge, one of the best OD people in the world. And she says, wisdom lies with the people. Your job is to give the people a voice. So my biggest suggestion is get suggestions from your people. They know what's going on. Don't do it to them. So I'm aware of time. Please keep putting questions in. But I think this is the most interesting part, because my passion in HR is not just an administrative function that does HR. We are a strategic, transversal organization that is accountable to the organization. Yes, we have to do the basics of what we just talked about really well, but we need to think about HR way beyond this. So, first of all, we need to think through transactionally what is really essential, what requires people to be back in the office, and let's prioritize that. We need to learn from the speed of decision making. Now, I don't know if you all attended the session in April, and to be honest, I can't remember if I asked the question, but let me ask you a question. Let's go back to August 2019. And you've been asked by the company to put together a team of people to come up with a proposal to move half your workforce to working from home. How long would it have taken you to identify and free up the people to be on the task force? How long would it have taken them to do their diagnosis and their research and come up with some suggestions? How long do you think it would have taken to get those recommendations through the process of all, oh, we can't work from home, it doesn't work, we need people face to face? And then how long would it have taken people to implement it? I asked the question in a company last year and they said we'd never have done it. I've asked the question in other and it's months. Well, Jump forward to March, April this year. How long did it take you? About a week. Let's stand back and learn from what's happened. And let's streamline all our governance processes. We've always needed to be agile. We've always needed to, our businesses need to get to market faster to win. We need to get to their market faster to help them win. You've got to review all your processes and your physical layout, because not everybody works in an office. We need to think of the layout in retail and manufacturing. We need to review who can work from home, and if possible, let's continue to let them work from home. And again, let's think through, where do HR business partners need to focus their time? I've already said this. We need them to focus on coaching our managers to care and listen. So you say, there's a question here about avoids being created every day between peers. Yes, I think it will, but it doesn't have to. I've seen a lot of organizations who have survived and thrived through this, and a lot of that has come from HR not just focusing on the transactional, but focusing on the people who are going to create meaning, who will address this void, that they are our managers. So we in HR need to spend time coaching our managers to care and listen, as well as driving performance. I said this in April. When a manager sits down with their people remotely, the first question is, did you deliver what I asked you to deliver yesterday? The first question is, how are you? Because this is tough for people. We need to sense the climate. Again, the huge void being created every day. We need to listen to this and understand this. Now, the challenge in the past is, I think too often HR people spent their whole time sitting in an HR office doing HR, not getting out there, understanding how people are feeling. And we can do that by getting outside our office virtually and listening to people. I mentioned this earlier. It is businesses need to reset their strategy. Strategy in the past has been based on a forecast of the future. That forecast of the future is irrelevant. The future we faced 6 months ago is not the future we face today. So we need to be challenging managers to think about the future, think about strategy. And then we need to translate that strategy into capability. And that's where we need to focus our HR activity. And by the way, this means we will probably be working with different people. I think the danger is HR people like to be liked. And the danger is we focus on coaching people we like. We need to work with the people who are going to be the future of the business. And these might not be the same people we were working with to think about strategy back in January. But that is the role of HR, is not to do HR stuff. Our purpose is to create the capability of an organization to deliver its strategy, which means we need to prioritize what matters to the people and the business and not what matters to HR. Again, I think I've said this before, but I say it again. HR is fixated with developing these big HR processes, performance management, employee engagement, leadership development, high potential programs that are solutions looking for problems. We need to really understand how we're going to help the business reset and thrive, not doing HR stuff, because I think this is the biggest opportunity we've ever had in HR. We can build on what I think have been astonishing things we've done over the last few months. But over the next few months, let's step up into that strategic role. Let's listen to our people. Let's listen to our business. So let me stop there. because I know the people from Zoho, there are a few things they want to say as well. But also any questions from anybody in the audience. There've been some really good ones so far. Anything else that you'd like to question? So if there are nearly 40 people, there must be some questions that you have. I'll be very depressed if there are no questions, because I haven't engaged you enough. So if there aren't any questions, let me hand back to, I'll go on mute again and hand back to Zoho to share a few more thoughts with you.
Great. Thank you so much, Nick. They were very insightful because you shared things that you already implemented, with hands-on experience in your organization. So they were very interesting. And again, thank you, audience, for those lovely questions. They were indeed thought-provoking. Now we've discussed about, ideas, things, strategies, and I want to discuss on how to actually put, all of these into practice, how to actually implement this. And that's why we have Zoho People, an online cloud-based HR management software to manage your HR processes and also to deliver good and exceptional employee experiences. So I want to give you all a very quick overview and highlight just some quick features, that I feel would be useful for you all to get back to your working places safely. So it's a highly customizable and a flexible tool. You can build your very own services. You can customize it the way we want. So that's something that our customers love about Zoho People. Even while you're getting back to work, you can create a custom service from scratch on how to get back to work safely. And other employee-centric apps can be created right within the platform. And it is a comfortable tool for employees to self-serve themselves, to check in their leave, their attendance patterns, and more. So it's completely employee-centric. And any process that you follow now in your organization in an offline way, it can be created online. So digitalizing your processes is really simple. And again, any practice, any events that you have, they can be completely automated right from hire to retire. So with our default services or with newly built custom services. And also, we all know how important it is to stay connected with our workforce now, right? So it lets you stay connected, you know, to properly communicate, to listen to your employees via feedbacks, via internal chats, and more. Let me quickly highlight some features, that I feel would be really helpful for you to get back to your offices safely. A simple health survey like this to check on your employees, their pulse, if they are ready, to get back to workplaces, and even what's happening with their families as well, their health. So this will give us first-hand information on how our employees are doing even before we, start planning on reopening these offices. Also, to put all of these ideas that we've discussed into action, into actual implementation, we have automatic workflows here because execution is important more than anything. So any course of action, any plan that you would like to follow to reopen your offices, you can automate it completely with mail alerts, updates, tasks, and checklists. For example, a notification to the housekeeping team to sanitize the place, to arrange desks, check on hygiene, even the notification to employees about what's happening with the organization when we are reopening, and more updates to your company's policies, your files, and other documents, even an entire checklist to cover the completion of tasks to see if they've actually been implemented and notify the HR team automatically in return. You can completely execute this. So even with a dispersed workforce, even while you're all working from homes, you can get the job done, you can execute it with automation. And like Nick had observed, this is a great time to upskill and keep up with the changing trends, because when we are going to reopen offices, the world, the business needs, the economy is not going to be the same anymore. So we have to be adaptable. So a learning management system like this, it gives you online learning courses. You can create custom courses, make it interactive, measure the usefulness of the course using feedback systems and more. And most importantly, you can bridge in skill set gaps and let your employees grow while they are planted in your organization. That brings us to the end of the webinar. It was a very fruitful session. It was very informative for me, and I'm sure you'll all agree with me on the same. Thank you, Nick, once again for this wonderful webinar, for sharing your hands-on experience with us. Attendees, if you have any questions, please write to us at webinars@zohopeople.com. We are happy to assist you. We'd love to hear from you if you have any feedback, any suggestions, and also further queries. And to know more about Zoho People, please visit zoho.com/people. Thank you once again. So we'll stop for another 10 minutes for Q&A. If you have any questions on things that we've discussed or on Zoho People, any doubts, you can let us know, and we'll be available online for the next 10 minutes to answer your questions. Thank you one more time.